Hey, it's Zach, and today I want to talk with you about how to hold a good conversation with students. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do I need coaching on talking with students? Uh, that seems a little extreme. That seems a little micromanaging. Like, what? Well, here's the reason why. There's actually a legitimate purpose behind it, and here's the reason why. Students these days, if you haven't noticed, sometimes it can be really hard to hold a conversation with them. Sometimes it's just a big challenge to start a conversation, to hold it, to keep it going. But what we do with students in our relationship with them is conversing, and conversing is a big part of this thing. And what I've found, honestly, is that many leaders get intimidated because they don't know how to hold a conversation well with students. And so what I want to do today is I want to give you 8 tips for holding a great conversation. And so hopefully as you converse with students, as you develop relationships, this is going to be helpful to you, especially in those times where you need to start a conversation with a student that maybe you don't know very well, or they're newer, or maybe they just are one of those students that's just a little bit hard to engage. Hopefully these tips will help you. So let's start with number one. Number one is this: have your eyes opened to who God would point out to you. Have your eyes open to who God would point out to you. Now, the reason I say this is because all of us have our favorite students. We all have our favorite students that are our go-to students. Conversation is easy with them. It just flows. It's fun to be around them. We all have those. And listen, that is a good thing. It's okay to have favorite students. It's okay to have those students that you go to and they're kind of your kids that you talk with all the time. That's absolutely fine. But the big thing is this: we need to be sensitive to who God might highlight to us, so that we're willing to step out of those, and go and converse with students that maybe we normally wouldn't. And so we've got to be attentive to and alert to who God might point out to us. And that can happen in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes for me, what will happen is I'll maybe notice a student that I've never noticed before. And at first, I'll see them and, I've never seen them before. And I'll go on and then I'll see them again. And sometimes repeatedly seeing somebody is sort of a cue. Hey, I should go introduce myself or say hi. Sometimes I'll see a student and I'll see them kind of sitting over by themselves. And I'll look and I'll notice that, and then I'll give it a minute, and then maybe I'll notice them again. That's a cue. Maybe I need to go engage that student in a conversation. Every so often, maybe you'll see a student and you just sense like, gosh, I feel like they're sad today. I feel like they need somebody to put their arm around their shoulder or something. Be open to who God might highlight to you, and then be willing to step out and engage with them in conversation. Number two, what and when questions are your best friends? What and when questions are your best friends? Now, what I mean by this is those types of questions that start with what and when typically require more than just a yes or no answer. We all know that when you ask questions that require a simple yes or a no, if a student is not overly willing to communicate, they will give you the shortest and simplest possible answer, and the conversation ends. So questions like, how was your day? Not a bad question, but unless you get a student who's really talkative, it's probably going to be good or fine. And it's a little hard to keep that conversation going. So what and when questions are a little bit simpler because they're gonna require a little bit more of an answer. Hey, what did you do at school today? Hey, what is your favorite subject in class this school year? Hey, when are you taking your next break? Hey, where are you going? Those types of questions are going to be really helpful. I guess where is another one of those questions too that requires a little bit more. Those are the types of questions that are going to help you in your conversations. And so have in your mind when you're going to talk to a student, have some what and when questions, where questions as well in your back pocket that you can pull out and that you can use. That's going to help you keep a conversation going and flowing. Number 3, affirm that you're focused and listening to what they're saying. Affirm that you're focused and listening to what they're saying. And this simply is just a matter of making sure that your cues, your personal cues are demonstrating that you're listening to them, that you're not just hearing words that are being spoken, you're actually listening to what they're saying. And this is simple. When students talking at you, make sure you're looking at them. Make sure you're making eye contact. Nod your head to indicate, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Even commenting on something that they said, oh, that's a really good point, or oh, that's so interesting. These are really important tools that you can use to help you with conversation. If a student feels like they're being listened to and heard, they're far more likely to engage with you longer than if they just feel like you're going through the motions of asking generic questions. Number 4, know when to move on. Know when to move on. This is something that I've had to learn the hard way a little bit. Because sometimes I'll try to engage with a student and I'll try to keep in a conversation maybe longer than I should. And then there's this awkward point when I realize, oh, they have no desire to talk anymore. So when you're in a conversation with a student, just know when you've done about as much as you can do, and then probably need to move on from that conversation. Sometimes you'll know that if you're talking to a student and you're really trying and they just keep looking away, they keep looking off, or they're trying to inch away from you a little bit. Just take those as cues that, hey, they're not ready for a longer conversation. And you can just end it quickly. Hey, great talking to you. So glad you're here tonight. See you later. But know when to move on. Don't be that leader that just keeps them in conversation and keeps them hostage. They're not going to ever want to talk to you again, and they will avoid you actually, which we certainly don't want. Number 5, exit the conversation well. Exit a conversation well. And I kind of covered that already in the previous point, but exiting the conversation well really has to do more with just making sure that it's not awkward. Try to not end on an awkward note. If there's a pause in conversation, don't draw attention to it. Sometimes if I'm engaging a student in conversation and they're, it's not going anywhere, or they've answered and it's kind of clear that they're done, or that maybe you're done, just make a clean exit. And honestly, the easiest way to do that is just to affirm them in some kind of a way and then move on. And affirming simply this: hey, great talking to you. Have a great night. I'm glad you're here. That's simple. And then you walk away. Find another student and engage them in conversation. But don't just walk away. Don't awkwardly exit. End your conversation well, and that'll that'll set you up for a good conversation later with that same student. Number 6, great conversation is less about length and it's more about heart. Great conversation is less about length and it's more about heart. So, listen, meaningful conversation does not mean that it was 5 hours long. You could have a meaningful conversation in a couple minutes. And so don't worry about, when you're engaging with students, don't worry if they're short. Don't worry if the conversations are short and maybe not to the depth maybe that you would like. If your heart's in the right place and you're really just trying to engage them, trying to show them that you love them, trying to let them know that they're cared for, that is the biggest deal. And your heart behind it is far more important than the length of the conversation. So that's number 6. Number 7, do your best to remember something from your conversation that you can bring up the next time. This is the big deal. When you're conversing with a student and you get some information like they've got a game coming up, or something happened at school that was funny or interesting, or even hard, maybe something going on in their family, try to remember that. And then the next time you see them, use that thing as a conversation starter. Hey, John, we talked about your game last week. How did that go? If you can remember specifics from conversations and then use that as your icebreaker the next time, boy, you're going to be in for a great run when it comes to holding conversations with students. And you know what? When a student knows that you've remembered something they've told you, automatically they're going to start to develop a trust with you. Your trust factor is going to go way, way up, and then they're going to be more willing to engage with you. Finally, number 8, in a large setting, mingle more and huddle less. Now, this is my personal expectation when it comes to leaders that serve under me, and it's just and I'll explain why, and I'll explain what this means. Let me say it again. In a larger setting, mingle more and huddle less. I mentioned at the very beginning that we all have our favorite students. We all have our favorite groups. We all have those students that it's just really easy to converse with. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's certainly a place for that. And I'm not saying that when you show up for youth that you shouldn't do that. But I think what's even more effective, especially in larger settings, and I'm talking about larger settings, is that you mingle more, meaning that you engage as many people as you possibly can for short snippets of time. What this allows you to do, it allows every student to be touched by you, to be impacted by you. It allows you to familiarize yourself with more students. It keeps you from being isolated and having the appearance of a clique. It keeps you from, it avoids that. And so mingle more and huddle less. So what I try to do on large gathering nights in youth is what I try to do is I try to make it my goal to spend a little bit of time with each person. I'm trying to touch every student that's there. Sometimes I might linger and talk for a little longer. Sometimes it might be just a quick pat on the back, like, hey, so glad you're here. But I try to make the rounds. And I think that effectively communicating with students starts with that, is being able to mingle. Because if you only stay with a certain cluster of kids, certain cluster of students, then it's going to be really hard for you to engage in conversation with all the other people over here. And there's so many other students that might really need what you can bring and might really benefit from you talking with them and being invested in their life. So that's another tip for being able to hold conversation is mingle more and huddle less. So there's the 8 points. Hopefully this was helpful to you when it comes to holding a great conversation. It might be tricky, and some of us are more inclined to it than others, but all of us as leaders can do a better job at holding good conversations. So look over these 8 items, look over these 8 points, let them go deep down, practice them on Wednesday nights, and you're going to be set up for great success. All right? Awesome. Talk to you later.